Welcome back to the Guyver Geek YouTube channel. I'm your host, Donavon Thompson, aka the Guyver Geek. And as you can all see already, we have another special episode of Guyver Legends today with none other than evil Ted Smith. Ted?
Hello, welcome. Thanks. Thanks
Yeah,
for having me.
of course. Um, One thing about being a Guyver fan is that it's kind of hard to find all the information in terms of production on the movies and those kind of things. In the last year, we've gotten a book by Don O'Brien. We've had this Guyver 4K Blu-ray release, so the book Budget Biomorphs, the making of the
Right.
Guyver films, and of course the Blu-ray and the 4K edition, which also you and Wyatt did commentary on. Um, and through all that information, it's been a pleasure finding and talking to people who worked on these live action films, Guyver and Guyver Dark Hero. And so I just want to say it's an honor, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. And I know the fans are really excited to hear from you as well.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, it was I think most crazy about the movies. We had no idea at the time we were making the movie. Uh I got in the movie because of my dear friend Steve Wang. Steve Wang I met when I moved to California in 1989. We were working. I came out to California to pursue my dream to work in the movie industry, and I got really roped into model making. Model making wasn't really my forte. I knew how to do it. I had this illusion I was going to be a makeup artist.
Mm.
But when I got out here, I got that Tom Savini book, like, what was it called? Grand Illusions.
Right.
And, I'm like, oh, yeah, this is super cool. So I got into makeup. But as a kid growing up, I always made stuff and was a fabricator, but didn't know what it was called at the time. So when I came to California to pursue makeup, I worked with these people who were half my age who were phenomenal. It made me realize maybe makeup is not my thing, but I got into model making and it was readily available everywhere. So I got into that. And then I met Steve Wang on Tales from the Dark Side of the movie. And Steve was making this thing called Kung Fu Rascals. And I just saw like clips of it. And I was like, this is amazing. I want to be a part of it. And Steve's like, yeah, sure, sure. Like, and then he just started assigning things for me to do, like making props and weapons. And then when I proved I would actually show up with stuff, then he started casting me to play characters, and it was fun. So I got to play wacky characters, to play a couple monsters, and then the rest is history. We became friends, and then he went on to make this thing called the Guyver, and that's how I got involved.
No, it's awesome. It feels like one of the things when I talk to people in the industry or who have been in the industry, there's never the common theme I always kind of run across is that there's no set path
Mm,
to making it in the industry, right? It's like these people were trying to do this one thing and ended up doing this one thing. I know one guy who was working at Cannes Film Festival ended up being a lawyer for a production company. Just like some weird jumps there, right? But I do want to talk about your jump from just being an audience member to like one day I want to do this, right? So I think in some of the research I've done is that you love Star Wars just like I do, and seeing Darth Vader on the big screen in 1977 kind of really kind of painted that picture for you a little better. So
yeah.
what was it about this movie, this experience? Like that's what I want to do right there.
It all started before Star Wars, guys. Right for
Okay.
this, there was a growing up in the '70s. Science fiction was treated as a joke.
Right.
Though science fiction was considered low budget or a genre thing, they always shot in black and white, or they never had any kind of respect. So the first big budget was Logan's Run. Logan's Run was the big budget sci-fi movie at the time, and that was, I want to say, I think I wrote it down. There was like I think it was like 76, I think it was when it came out. But anyway, it was, I'm like, oh my God, guys in his giant domes and running around with guns. And that, I was like, as a kid, again, loved it. But before Logan Run was Jaws. Jaws came out, and it was the first blockbuster movie. And I saw Jaws, and immediately I made a giant shark out of cardboard and paper mache. I made a shark, and my friends and I would get in the backyard, and there's a retail store next to my house. So would get like appliances like washers and dryers and refrigerators. So these giant cardboard boxes every weekend when they'd unload their shipment. So I'd go next door, steal the boxes, put them in my backyard. We'd get the box upright and we'd stare at the blue sky. And then I would bang in the boxes as being the shark and would knock the box over. My friends would dangle their feet out, and I would take the giant shark thing I made and grab it and grab their feet through the mouth and pull them into the shark. And like, we did this for hours.
That's awesome. That is
Yeah.
so
And
cool.
then Logan's Run came out. And again, I started making Sandman guns, and my friends and I would run around and call each other runners. We'd switch off who was Sandman, who was a runner. And so we were doing that. And then Star Wars came out. For all you youngsters out there, let me tell you something. Star Wars, uh, there was no visual effects. We had visual effects like 2001 and Logan's Run with big giant models. But what George wanted to do never been done before. So it was the idea was insane. Like I want spaceships, but I want them moving like 2001, but moving really fast. So as an audience member, you went to the theater like, oh, the Star Wars thing. What is this? I don't know. And you went to the theater and your mind was blown because never have you ever seen a spectacle like that. So it was like, it didn't just change me as a kid, it changed the world. It affected me and everybody across the globe. So again, it didn't make me want to work in movies. It just made me love movies. I loved them. And like, so as a kid, I just made cardboard and started making spaceships and figures and things just with the intention of just making stuff. Cause I was a kid, I just loved it and wanted to be it. And we started pulling out, I think Wyatt and I laughed about this too. We would love Star Wars so much, we'd make models and we'd get a Super 8 camera and get in our garage and shoot film. And then we like, why doesn't my stuff not look like Star Wars? I'm doing exactly what they did.
Right.
I don't get it. Why does it not look like Star Wars?
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's hard.
no, I was going to say, well, there's this thing that I used to give tours at my old college campus, and in the art department. At the very end of it, the dean or whatever would kind of tell all the parents, hey, there is a path here for your child if they want to be in the arts someday. Like the credits at the end of every movie, those are all jobs, right? And so someone is working that job, all the time. So what's like, I guess, where's the connect in your brain of like, oh, I can make models for a living, or I can do creature design for a living. Like, how did that start?
It all started because I was just like everybody else. I was intimidated. Like when people go, I was in St. Louis as a kid in high school. My friends were like, oh, you're gonna work in the movies, and I was like, oh no, because my preconceived notion to what it took to work in the industry was like everybody's.
Right.
Oh, you had to know cameras and film and education, and you had to know all this stuff in order to work in the industry. When you get out, you find out that's all baloney. It's crap. It's not true at all. When I first came out here and started working, I realized people above me that were in charge, I was like, these guys don't know what they're doing. They're like, I would be raise my hand like, hey man, there's an easier way to do this. Like, shut up, kid. All right, whatever. And I progressively, so what it was I was living in St. Louis. I was intimidated like everybody else, had a dead end job in a cubicle. My buddy Wyatt packed his entire life, went to California and left. Like, I'm out of here, Ted. And he stayed with me for a while. He was in the middle of transit. He's like, I got all the stuff all packed up. He's like, I'm going to go to California and pursue my dreams. I'm like, yeah, buddy, good luck. So he leaves and I go back to my cubicle and my in and out basket at work, with my little, doing my phone calls and bills and sales. And he calls me a week later and goes, hey man, I'm working on this zombie movie. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I'm working on this low budget zombie movie, and it's half this makeup stuff. Not even it's even like subpar. Like you could do way better than this, Ted. I'm like, that's all I needed to hear. That was it. I was done. Like a lunatic, I gave my 30-day notice to my job, packed my entire life in a U-Haul truck, and drove to California and got an apartment right next door to his. Wow. And I wouldn't recommend this to people because I look back at now as an older person, like how I was just like, I literally had no fear. Like ignorance is bliss to a certain degree, like just moving forward. That's what I did. I came out and got a small apartment, and I was working within about 3, it took me about 3 weeks. I was getting a little nervous. Within 3 weeks living in LA in a small apartment in Canoga Park, I got my first job. It was a Miracle Landing. It was a made for TV movie starring Connie Selica. It was a reenactment of an actual airline tragedy, the Aloha Airlines.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys don't know about this, the airplane was flying on its way to Hawaii, and the top of the plane just peeled open like a banana peel, just like ripped open. Yeah. And everybody flew like one flight attendant, and that was it. Everybody else was strapped to their seatbelts, and the plane was twisting. This guy was like an ex-military pilot. He took and dropped the altitude, and as unstable as the plane was, he still brought it down and landed with only one casualty.
Crazy.
So crazy story. But we did a made-for-TV movie version, so it was all model work, and that was I was like loving it. Just I was my first job. We were working 15, 16 hours days,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was insane. Loved it.
You kind of touched upon this idea. It sounds like imposter syndrome, right? Like, oh, I can't go out there and I can't do this, I can't do
Oh,
that. So, like,
completely.
how do you, you said you don't recommend people, doing something crazy out of no fear. I kind of think the opposite. I think people should be going
Oh,
towards adventure if they can. But how do you wrestle with
but
imposter syndrome? Yeah, but it's a big
yeah,
but. Yeah.
here's what it is. It's like I think my biggest problem was I depreciate my own value. I grew up in the Midwest. I'm a St. Louis boy, and we're very humble. And what it humble, I was just telling my wife this recently before I did your show here, is that when I was a kid, one of my biggest mistakes I made when I came out here, I was working far less than what I was worth. Because one thing I had, I was talented. I learned and I listened. And when I was working, it was like working at a fountain of information. I was a sponge. Every show I worked on, I learned something. And I was surrounded by all these talented guys. And I was like, oh crap, and the guys, oh yeah, I do this. And so you were just surrounded by all these people's techniques. And so I was picking up all these techniques. So within the first 3 or 4 years, I was just learning so much like a sponge. I loved it. And I look back on the stuff I did, I cringe like, oh my God, like, but by working with other people and learning and picking up techniques and stuff, I got better and better at what I did. But for example, I came out in 1989, and my job in St. Louis, I was getting $7 an hour, which was, again, in St. Louis, I was still able to pay for an apartment, pay rent, buy groceries, $7 an hour. And so when I came to California, my very first job, the guy turned to me and goes, what's your rate? And I froze like, what? Like in my brain, I'm like, what? And he goes, your hourly rate. And so I was like, and I just immediately spouted $10. And he paused and goes, wait, you'll work for $10 an hour? Yeah. You start Monday.
I bet.
And
Yeah.
I didn't realize at the time that $10 was pretty cheap for 1989 working
Yeah.
in the industry. But for me, it was I got my first check, which was $900 for like a week of work. I'm like, oh my God. And then you learn very quickly, oh wait, California rent, California food. Like,
Right.
but you had to adjust, but it was again, it's all a learning curve. You just have to learn. But that's what I recommend to people, is be a big fish in a small pond. Start going to local theaters, ask people. Like, I always feel that just crafting and learning and challenging yourself. If you're uncomfortable with it, then good, you should do it. Like, I always like to challenge myself. I haven't challenged myself in a long time with certain things, but I'm on a project right now. I'm doing some things I haven't done before, which is kind of fun and exciting. And so it's good to challenge yourself, but yeah.
Well, I've
There
got in
is a,
trouble. Also, I got in trouble on the flip side of that before, where I didn't charge enough, and
yes,
they didn't hire me because they're like, oh, you must not be a serious player because you're too cheap. And
yes.
at the time, I was like, this is an astronomical amount of money, but this is not enough apparently. So it's a weird dynamic you have to kind of navigate.
You set your values, and I learned that from my friend Steve Wang. And very quickly, he's told me, he said, when you're bidding on something, like, it's your reputation. And Steve, real quick story, he did, he was phenomenal at what Steve does when it comes to sculpting, making monsters. And this is the time when Buffy was on. Buffy the there's an effects company, I think it was called Optic Nerve or something at the time. They were doing this stuff for Buffy, but a TV show, the turnaround was insane. And they won this monster suit. And they're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And they went to Steve Wang and said, hey, we need this monster suit within a week or something. It was like crazy. And Steve went, okay, because he's mathematical. He went and said, okay, sculpting, got to sculpt it. I can, get me and somebody else could sculpt the thing in probably a day or a half. We'll make a mold, make a foam rubber. We'll make 2 suits, paint. So Steve's like, okay, figured it out and gave him a bid. And they're like, oh my God, it's really expensive. They froze. And Steve said, yes, but that's my guarantee that day on set, it'll be done.
Right.
They're like, well, it's really expensive. He went, okay, but I'm telling you, that's a guarantee. So what they do what everybody did. They went with somebody else. It didn't get done on time. They dumped tons of money into it. They ended up spending more money.
Right.
If they just hired him. They went way over their budget and ended up having something that was half done. They were fixing it on set while they were shooting.
Yeah,
But again, it takes money. But the thing is, you're right. You build up a reputation and you're worth your value. And you're right. So how they know you're serious is your rate and your time and your money. And so if they think it's too expensive, you say, well, I'm sorry, I hope to work with you maybe down the road when you can afford me.
for sure. Yeah, there's a weird push and pull there, like for freelance work where they don't take into account like they're buying your experience too. They're like, well,
Oh no.
why is it more expensive if you're doing it faster than this other guy? And it's like, well, I can do it faster because I've been doing it for 10 years,
Well,
whatever.
yeah.
And
I
so
always tell
you're buying
people
that. Yeah.
you're charging the time out of your life. I don't do hourly, I do daily. I have a daily rate because I know what I can do in a day. I always tell people don't bother with hourly, just figure it because you're not compensating for gas and driving and all that stuff. Just figure out this is my rate for that day. So I judge by day. I knew how I can estimate my day. So I have a day rate. This is my budget for this day for so it's a daily rate and what I work for
It's
when I
pretty
work for
cool.
myself.
Yeah. Now as far as any role models in the industry, you talked about Grand Illusion as kind of like a good inspiration, a good book to read to kind of get you in that path. Did you work with any role models? Did you have any role models go into the industry and you're like, you end up meeting them, or can you kind of explain a little bit of that?
It's funny. I met James Cameron briefly and ended up
Okay.
it's so funny. I met him and then I ended up working for him years later. I was a huge Terminator fan and just recently I had this thing called Masterclass on
Yeah.
YouTube where you can spend money. If you guys are big filmmakers, I highly recommend getting the Masterclass. Just pay for it like this 1 month subscription and watch all of Jim Cameron's videos about him making films. And he does a great breakdown about everything it takes into making films. And so I read so much about him, but actually seen it, but then been a big fan of his for so long that I worked on T2 3D The Ride for Universal.
Wow. I did not know
And
that. That's
so we
awesome.
were at, yeah, we were over at, I was at Digital Domain and they were doing Apollo 13 and they brought me in to kind of help with that. But they're multitasking and they had me work on it. And they're like, hey, Ted, since you're here, let's throw you onto the T2 3D ride. So we were building all these miniatures and stuff and landscapes. And we built these drones, these little flying drones,
Yeah.
which were in the game. Again, this is again, this 3D, just for all your fans out there, this was based on a screenplay that James had a rough outline for T3. So he was going to do T3. This was, and they thought we want to do this right. So I'll base it on the script I have. So he kind of wrote that and we built this up. So when James Cameron came into the shop, like, I'm like, holy crap, there he is. And so he kind of walked through him, got to talk. And he was very, there was something he said that stuck with me. We had this flying drone thing. It was machined aluminum with a metal blade that spun, but it was a gag in the film. They're all digital. And so when Arnold grabs it, we wanted to have it spinning. So his thing, you could hit with your finger and spin, you could grab it, hold it. And it was heavy. It was because it was all machined aluminum. We grabbed it and Cameron picked it up and went, this is really heavy. And we're like, yeah, we're like, well, Arnold's a strong guy. And he said, yeah, that's the mistake people do with Arnold. He's strong. It's like, yeah, but you're doing take after take after take. It gets to be exhausting after a while. And he's
Yeah.
like, so he immediately said, can we make this lighter? We said, sure. So we took the metal and drilled holes into it. But he said, you have to think about when you're doing movies, you have to do multiple takes. And so I ended up working with him again on Titanic. And we were doing miniatures and it was amazing that we would shoot we do these big visual effect shots of the ship breaking apart, the smokestack breaking off and stuff. So we would take all the stuff we shot that day and we'd do this thing called dailies. For you kids out there, what dailies are is all the footage we shot the day before. They would develop it and bring it back and show us the following day. So we would all watch it to see what it looked like. So we'd all sit there and watch it. And I had my dear friend Ted, also by the same name, we would watch the footage and go, oh yeah, Jim's gonna like this, he's gonna hate this. Like we'd always play like what's Jim gonna like and what not like. And they would take it, drive it to his house, and he would watch it again live. And this is before Skype and video, so it was a big deal to have a video link in the office to Jim's house. So Jim would take the footage and load it into his Moviola, and we would watch Jim watch it at we'd all watch in the office, watching him
Yeah.
watch it, and he would point to things like, what's this, what's that? And so when it says a James Cameron film, they're not joking. This guy oversaw every
Yeah.
freaking shot of that movie. He shot it, edited it. And so
Truly the
yeah,
first reaction videos right there. Like you guys were doing the first reaction videos ever. You know, it's a
yeah. And
big
we were
thing.
like,
Yeah.
and yeah, pretty intense. And the only thing he did, it made me stand out. Like he's such a man of like focus and detail, and he's a stickler for detail. And even though it was a quick shot, the ship was breaking apart and smoke was, spelling out of the ship, and it was all shot at high speed. And there were these portal windows on the side of the ship, and there was smoke coming out. And Jim stopped and said, "Hey, there's smoke coming out of the windows of the ship when there's supposed to be portal windows. Why is there not glass behind the windows?"
Mm.
And we're all like, and again, we're just model makers. We looked at our supervisor who was right next to us, and we're like, "Yeah, why aren't the windows in there?" And he said, "Well, we're having problems with the glass breaking in the windows." And then Jim immediately says, "So your solution was not to put glass in? That was your solution? How about this? I'm spending, I don't know, $45,000 a shot. So let's just do this right the next." So we did it again. We ended up doing it 4 times, having the ship break apart. And it took 4 weeks to do it every time. But granted, he knew what he wanted. And everybody at the time the film was delayed, was supposed to have a summer release. Jim said it's not going to be ready. The studio goes, "Oh no, it has to be ready." And he goes, "I'm telling you guys to your face, it's not going to be ready." So he ended up taking away his back end. He goes, "I'll tell you what, I'll lose my back end. So if you guys, therefore, you guys don't lose money." So he agreed to do that to give himself more time. The film comes out, it's a smash hit. So the studio felt so bad that it was so successful, they gave his back end back.
Whoa. I've never heard of that before.
No, that was, yeah. They were
That's
like,
crazy.
yeah, because they're dirtbags. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they ate crow because they fought him tooth and nail on the entire thing. And when it came out, was the biggest grossing movie of all time. The studio was like, "Yeah, we want to keep working with Jim, so let's just give him the bet." So they gave him the points and they gave it
Yeah.
back to him. And then he
That
got
makes
stupid
sense.
rich and he took a break after that movie. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah, that
but
that
that's
makes sense. Yeah, that's crazy. That's probably more why they did it. So for the fallout for them not doing it later, for sure.
yeah,
Well, I was going to ask, you mentioned T2 3D The Ride, which also that's incredible.
yes,
I love doing that as a kid when I go to Universal Studios. But my question is, you're doing these like sci-fi kind of movies, these creatures, these kind of miniatures or models. That's an opportunity since those are things that are not from this world. It's something that doesn't exist in our
right,
timeline, right? That's an
right.
opportunity to kind of put yourself in there, like your own creative license. Of course, you're going to have a James Cameron says no, 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 but every now and then you're going to sneak something in, right? So, like, what is like? Do you feel yourself in your work that way? Like, in what's some ways that you feel like you've translated your own personal taste or ideas into a project?
When you're working for somebody else, it's their vision. It's like, and when you work at a prop house, they don't want your input. They don't want your creativity. They want it done. And that's the issue. It's like, and they give you drawings, and it's amazing. When I first I worked at a prop house, a hand prop room for literally 15 years of my life. I worked at this prop house, and sometimes we get really good drawings, sometimes we get really crappy drawings, or we just get some notes like, "Hey, just make it look cool." I'm like, "Oh," so we would make stuff, but very rarely did we have any creativity. And that was kind of like the thing that was hard on the bigger budget shows. Lower budget movies, you can definitely, because they're just happy you show up with a prop. So that's where you can kind of embellish a little bit and put your own spin on. But most of the times when you're working on stuff, you want to get this. It's the director's job. It's his job to give you their vision. And so it's your job to listen to them and give them what you think is their vision. There's good directors and there's bad directors. And a lot of bad directors, and there's the good ones. But yeah,
For
it's
sure.
this. As for creativity, mostly on low budget films, like you can get a little bit of spin, or like I get to help out on the Guyver, for example, on the Guyver unit. Steve Wang was making the Guyver, and I was a big fan of the comic book. And when the movie came out, Steve had no idea what Guyver was. Like, what is it? I'm like, "Oh, dude, it's a crazy Japanese manga and anime." And so and the Guyver unit was very mechanical. The comic book, it's like these metal plates with the control metal, and it's got a bunch of coils packed into it. And so when we were doing the live action, Steve was making the suit, and he was, they're all everybody sculpting. He was doing this, and he was also directing and going through. So everybody was scattered. And Steve turned goes, "Ted, you're a prop maker, like a model maker. Make the Guyver unit." Like, oh crap! So I was able to take the look of the Guyver suit and and so I sculpted and did sketches and showed, and Steve was there in the shop and he'd look over my shoulder like, yeah, it's cool, add more detail, do this, do that. And so that's what we did. And I did that. And now I got to do the effect of the transformation too, when it opened and stuff. So, and again, that's where the Tom Savini Grand Illusion book came in handy, because there's a great gag in Dawn of the Dead where Tom Savini takes a machete and he puts it in the guy's head and buries the machete in this guy's head. And if you guys all being Dawn of the Dead fans out there, it was the best trick ever, because he just took a real machete and cut a scallop out of it and placed it on the actor's head and had blood running around it. And then they called action. He just yanked it out really fast.
Right.
So they played the film in reverse. So you see this go whoop, and it comes in so fast that you don't see the scallop mission. You just see the motion, and then boom, the machete landed. And I'm like, oh my God, what a great idea. And when Steve started telling me, oh, I want the Guyver unit to open and tentacles shoot out. And I'm like, what? And I kept thinking about like cables and air and shooting stuff out. And all of a sudden I thought, wait a minute, how about I do it in reverse? And so that's what we ended up doing. So I did the gag where the unit's already out and I had tentacles everywhere. And they called action. I would yank the cables in, pull the strings, close the panel, and then push the control metal up. And so we did everything in reverse. So I did it all backwards.
No, that's awesome. And let's go ahead and get into the Guyver unit too. And I want to get more into that scene as well. So the Guyver unit, it does all kinds of cool things, right? Like it pulses.
Yep.
Obviously it has sound effects. I'm assuming that was something that was put in post later.
But that's all done in post. Yeah, it's all done in post.
Yeah. And so what's the most challenging part of creating the Guyver unit? I know that Steve is sitting there kind of looking over your shoulder, but other than translating it, what was the part of, because we had, like you said, the metal plates, the coils, the control metal.
Yeah.
What's the most challenging part of the kind of nail there?
I guess it's just that it was one of those things that I thought it might said, because we didn't do a test. There was no test.
Right.
I was just like, here's what I want to do. And Steve's like, all right. And it was like, the thing was so funny was the fear of just they're like, yeah, sure. Like working at a shop where instead of them going, they were just like, yeah, sure, Ted. And they would just unsupervise me. Like, because again, they're so busy, they don't have time to, they're like, yeah. So when I pitched it to him, he's like, yeah, totally. I'm like, all right. So I did it and I would kind of show them, like we'd set it all up and I just would physically show them. They saw it back. They all saw it in reverse. And Steve was a good filmmaker enough to, he could see it. Yeah, this will work, this will work. And then the most difficult thing was after I got really confident, like, yeah, this is awesome. He goes, hey, I want a shot where when I want Sean holding it and you see the tentacles moving like this.
Right. Yeah.
Like moving, sliding among each other. I'm like, what? Dang it. I'm like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? How am I going to do it? So what I ended up doing was, and again, it's all quick seconds, really super fast. But the Steve was sort of throwing ideas at me like, well, you can make a bunch of discs, like stack a bunch of discs together and have them like rotate. I'm like, what? Like, I'm not an engineer. Like, he was like, Steve started spitballing these ideas. And I was like, yeah, okay. So what I ended up doing was I took a Guyver unit. We had molds. I had molds. So I cast a Guyver unit, the shell of it, and I cut half of it off and just had one half of the Guyver unit and I dressed it. And it had the cable and I made, I took a rubber and cast the ribs on the cylinder itself, the ribs. And I did 2 or 3 strips and again, it's all black and red because the whole thing was black and red. And Steve goes, well, break it up so you can at least see something move. So I did lights and darks with the red and I overlapped pieces of rubber like this and this. And I literally had them on hoops and on a stick and I would pull them different directions. And again, it's just a quick close up so that the actor was holding it and I was behind holding the camera and they'd call action. I would just pull it because we just need a couple seconds of it moving. And when you ever see the prop itself, it's horrendous. It's such a jerry-rigged thing, but it worked. And so that was challenging, but we pulled off. And when you watch the film, it goes by super fast of him because the gag is Sean finds it for the first time. He opens up the suitcase. And oh, by the way, all those shots of him finding it and opening the box, those are my hands.
Oh, yeah, cool.
So they shot the actor doing all the stuff. And then because it was all pickups we did like months later. So because we shot the scenes, but then we didn't get any shots of him actually holding it. So it was all second unit stuff. So the actor came back and had shots of him picking up and looking at it, but then he did his shots and he went home. So we stayed later and then shot all the inserts, and all the shots of him picking it up and holding it and looking at it was all my hands in the
Yeah,
studio
that's a
holding it and stuff.
cool little tidbit there. There's tons of movies that I've directed or
Oh,
whatever, short films where my hands are in there.
yeah.
I've had adult hands double as children hands before, and it's pretty obvious if you're really looking for it, but it works sometimes, you
But yeah,
know.
as long as it's fast, it's super quick. And so
Yeah.
yeah, lots of and when Sean, like there's all this like little like when he makes his hand to a fist when he turns to the Guyver, like that's my hand. Like and
Oh,
then
cool.
yeah, there's and then when they when I was there, we were taking Jack Armstrong and we were putting stuff on his body, and I was there, we were yanking the panels off his body. We'd wrap stuff up and pull him off his body and then just play it in reverse. It was tons of reverse stuff. So we just did the Guyver and then him being transformed and stuff. We did a lot of stuff too.
Now, I'm sure you had probably multiple different Guyver units, probably an action version, like
Yeah,
for the
we actually had
close-ups. Okay,
we had two. We had two. We had the hero one
right.
that was well, I take it back as three. So with the hero one that was the cast with the glowing metal in it, and then we had a rubber one that I made. They didn't ask for it. I made it because I knew they're gonna be jumping, throwing around the ground. So I made a rubber one. So we had a hero one, a rubber one, and then we had the functioning opening one, and then we had the one that was cut in half for the moving sliding tentacle things. So we did that. But true story on this, we're doing all those pickups, me holding it and stuff. So I was in charge of taking care of the Guyver unit. I took care of that baby and had it on the set and stuff. I had it in a box. So I was super because it was just one hero one. So it was always so we go to the place, we do the shooting, all the insert stuff, and I'm like looking for it. Like, hey, where's that? And George, oh no, we got it. We're gonna take it back to the shop. I'm like, you sure? You don't mean I'll you guys, oh yeah, we got this. So they told me over to my face, oh, we got it, we got it. We leave. Yeah, you know where this is going. A
Yeah,
couple days later, they're like, so where's the unit, Ted? What? We want to do some more shots with it for the key art and packaging. I'm like, I crossed my arms and said, I told you guys where it was asked you for it when we were there, and you said we got it, and I knew it. I said, all right. I washed my hands. I walked away, and sure enough, it got stolen. Got stolen. The Guyver unit, guys, is out there somewhere. Somebody has it.
that's crazy. I mean, the Guyver unit, there's like a few holy grails in my life that I always wanted. The Guyver unit was one of them, and I did
Right?
get the Steve
Oh,
Wang
yeah,
ECC one. I know it's a little
that's
different. I
that,
know
that's from
the
Guyver. That's from Guyver too.
right Guyver Dark here. I know the tentacles don't go in as much as the first one because they're supposed to like basically control the control metal narratively, right? And so I would love a replica of the first Guyver unit as well. If we could make that happen sometime, if we
Yeah,
could
that's on
get
my list. I do have one. I have to my plans. I want to make a says about foam fabricator. I teach kids. I want to make a pattern, make a foam one. That's always the
yeah,
thing I want to do. Like you 3D print the control metal, then make a foam Guyver unit. It'd be fun.
that'd be super
So
cool, and I would
that's on
love
my
to watch
list,
that.
guys. That's on my
Yeah,
list.
I can't wait to watch it. Now, as far as you did, obviously a lot of different things in the first Guyver film. One of them being the actor inside the striker suit,
Mm,
and
yes,
you had experience with this with Kung Fu Rascals, right? With being inside the creature costumes.
that's literally what got my job as the
Okay,
monster because I when Steve and I be we worked in Kung Fu Rascals, and then Steve had me jumping around. I was a frog. There's these frog guys, and I was a frog. Got my butt kicked as a frog. We played ninjas, and then Steve's like, "Hey man, um, there's this character called the Bamboo Man from Kapow, like this villain." And it was a costume that Steve made from a movie called Jitters that kind of came and left. Nobody saw it, but he had this amazing, like Chinese demon character, and so it fit me. And Steve's like, "You want to play the character?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I played the Bamboo Man Kapow in the movie. It was just so much fun because we're shooting in the soundstage and I had all this makeup on and I had contacts. And that was the first time I realized that they would make me rinse my mouth with black and green food coloring. And it was really kind of a pain in the ass. But I realized what was interesting was Steve goes, I don't want to see the pink in your mouth.
oh,
Like, and he's absolutely right. When you watch a movie and you see somebody's eyes or you see their mouth or you see the pink or see their teeth, it kind of pulls you, oh, it's a guy in makeup. And so when I was the Bamboo Man from Kapow, the movie's really dark. You don't see it, although some really good photographs maybe. But I had contacts in, and I would do this rinse with my mouth because I had the gold teeth, so the mouth, when I opened it, my tongue was just dark and black, so it was like this void. So it was such a great gag, a simple technique,
Yeah,
and I
really
would do it
cool.
periodically in between shots, just rinse my mouth and keep it dark.
How bad did it taste?
Oh, this is food coloring.
Hmm.
Didn't really taste like anything. Just
Yeah. Well,
just like nasty.
as far as being an actor in a creature costume, there's a lot that comes with that, right?
Yes,
There's the temperature, there's just getting in and out of the costume. It's obviously
yes.
there's infamous stories of like the Batman suit, right? So how do you, first of all, what's the process of getting into that? Who helps you and how does that work? And second of all, now you're an actor. Now you're acting on set.
Right.
And so like how do you translate getting your performance through the costume to the camera to the audience?
Um, with Steve, it was like the thing I learned with Bamboo Man, you just go big. And I learned about going big in the sense of like every mannerism you make, if you're in a suit like this or that, it's like it's very subtle, so you don't see it. So you have to go a little bit bigger. And I learned when I was doing Kung Fu Rascals, Bamboo Man had these great hands and these great nails. So I would talk with my hands and I would gesture or roll my fingers and like so you could see it. I was backlit. In the movie, I was backlit a lot. So it was all about lifting my shoulders, bringing my arms out and talking and pointing and doing so. This is all under Steve's direction. He's like, oh, go big. This. So when we got cast to play Stryker, Steve knew I was able to work in a suit. Stryker was foam rubber and it was really thick. I had a big head on, and the creature, the way it was open, I only could see out of his mouth. So my eyeballs on the suit were on the top of my head. So when I had my mouth open, when I looked at people, I had to look at their chest. So through my mouth, when I looked at the chest, I knew I was looking at their eyes, and I always had to go a little bit manners and go bigger. And since it was kind of the character was kind of funny and comical, I was kind of projecting JJ Walker because I'm like, I'm supposed to be the monster version of him. So I'm doing all these big gestures and stuff. And it was just, yeah, I was projecting and I loved it. It was so much fun. And again, I went from living in St. Louis, had a cubicle job, and then within less than a year, I'm on set with Michael Berryman and Mark Hamill. I'm in this big giant striker suit dancing. I was like, it was crazy. It was a blast. It was a dream come true. And that was fun. And that was my introduction to Mark Hamill too. I had a scene where I had to knock Mark Hamill to the ground and wrestle with him and stuff. And and of course most of it got cut from the movie, but it was so great. Mark would look in there and go, hey, you okay? I'm like, no, Mark, I'm hot and uncomfortable.
I
And
can't
Mark's like,
imagine.
yeah,
I can't imagine just one day. Oh, I'm working with Luke Skywalker today. Like
yeah,
no big deal. Yeah,
yeah,
wild,
that's
very
crazy.
wild. So like, what was there any? I know like in some theater performances, when they're wearing costumes, like let's say a lion and a Wizard of Oz, there's actually like technology to put like cooling systems inside of there. It'd be like ice bags or like
Oh yeah, the cool suit and all that kind of stuff. I've every film I worked on, I've heard so many things about those things. I never had one. It was
oh
like because there was kind of the edge where I know Brian Simpson, who was one of my big mentors, he was when we were doing Kung Fu Rascals, he was doing Predator 2 at the time. So they were doing Predator 2, and he was doing one of the Predators, and he worked on the first one. He did stunts for the first one, so they brought him back on the second one. And so he was working with me and helping me out and stuff. And so Brian did a lot of stunt stuff. We were like jumping from trees and we had cables and stuff doing stunt work for Kung Fu Rascals. And then Brian came on a little bit for Guyver, and I was striker, so he helped me with the stunts on that as well, like throwing me against the wall and jumping mats and doing mini trampolines and things. But Brian always told me, he goes, when you're a suit guy, from the time you put the suit on, you're working. And he wasn't joking because actors don't work. And so when they're off camera, they're not working. They're sitting, watching, on their phone or whatnot. But when you're a suit guy, you're in the suit. You don't get out of the suit during takes. You're still in the suit. And Brian would tell me he'd show up on Predator 2 and be in the suit for like 12 hours and they wouldn't even shoot him. And they're like, and Brian's like, well, then, and he finally learned really quickly, I'm not getting in the suit until you guys are ready to use me. Because he would get exhausted, he'd be sitting around all day. And then they're like, oh, we're gonna do this quick shot. He's like, dude, I've been in the suit for 12 hours. I'm exhausted. I've been sweating my balls off. It's like, so he said that, and I thought that's not a bad idea. And every time I'd show up on set on Guyver 2, they like, get in the suit, get in the suit. And I did the same thing. I get in the suit and they wouldn't shoot me for 16 hours.
That's
And
crazy.
so then I learned when I got on set, they're like, all right, Ted, suit up. I'm like, when are you guys shooting? Oh, we got to shoot right away. And I was like, when are you guys shooting? And finally I would just step around the first AD, the assistant director, and I'd find Steve and go, Steve, when are you guys shooting? He goes, oh, we're going to be about 2-3 hours. I'm like, thank you. And I come
Yeah.
back, go, I'm not getting in the suit because
I
I'm
don't
going to
blame
be,
you.
yeah, it's August in a warehouse in August in the Valley. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
not getting that suit.
No, I assume too, like I think I've heard some stories, and correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes the suits are so tight on you that your skin literally can't get oxygen, right? So like how do you
You have to what is the trick is you learn it quickly when you're on Guyver. The first Guyver was fun because I was able to take my head off. Um, in between shots, I had this big foam rubber suit, but as soon as you took your head off and the heat would just shoot out of your head, you take your gloves. People don't realize this is why when you're in winter, you get your gloves and hat on your head. Hat's the most important thing. You keep your head warm, you're fine. So in a suit, um, you'd get really hot. So as soon as you take your head off, your hands off, you're fine. If we had more time, you take your shoes off for the best. So you just sit there with your gloves off and your feet off. And you're like, ah.
Yeah.
And you get like half an hour, you're fine. You put the thing back on, you go back, it's great. That was easy. So for me, but I was young. I was like 26, 27.
Yeah.
I was super fit, jumping around like a maniac. I was having a blast. So
Was there any injuries during that, like for the stunt
uh,
department, like you're doing stuff like that?
here's the funny thing. I did tons of fight scenes in Kung Fu Rascals. We're being kicked, flipped, pulled on cables, no injuries. Never. Not. And so on Guyver, I was perfectly going great. I had a track record, perfect. No injuries. And then we're rehearsing a fight scene at the very end of the movie. We're in this big that's where Stryker, we're all in the lab, and Guyver comes back. Sean's grown back, he goes,
Right.
comes to the guy's body, he comes back, he's like, ah, he's ready to go. So we're shooting so fast on the fly, we just made up a fight scene because we didn't have time to rehearse anything. So Steve's like, yeah, okay, here's what we're gonna do. So Steve comes in and goes, I'm gonna be Guyver, and you guys come. So we're blocking this fight out, and Steve was working on the fight. So Steve does a roundhouse kick right to my chest.
Oh,
And and when you're doing stunt fights, when you're martial arts guys, you use your toes, not your heel. In real life, you use a heel. But Steve wasn't thinking, so he just put a heel right to my chest. And I went, oh, and went down like a deck of cards. I was like, oh my God. and like, and like, and then we all started laughing. And I said, dude, I worked this. The only injury I got was from the director kicking me in the chest. So,
that's pretty awesome. Was there a favorite moment on set? Like what was your like looking back on it, like this, like, oh man, that's what I enjoyed the most about it.
um, it, yeah, it was so fast. And I think what it was, my favorite moment was we were shooting, coming toward the end, and Brian Usen, the producer, loves Stryker so much. He's like, who's the guy in the Stryker suit? That's Ted. So Brian Usen, we had a guy, people know Kung Fu Rascals, Troy Froman was cast in the movies to play the gang member. But Troy, being an actor, he got a job to do a Ford truck commercial. And for all you actors out there, a national commercial is a big payday. So Troy's like, holy crap. I'm going to take the truck commercial. So he took it. So he wasn't available to play the gang member. And so Brian Hughes is like, can we get Ted to do it? So Steve's like, dude, Brian Hughes wants you to play the gang member. I'm like, great. So for you guys, I played Ronnie, the gang member, which is the crazy guy with the nunchucks.
Right.
And that was me. And so I show up on set and they dress me all up. And it's so funny that whole fight scene thing was on the fly. We kind of rehearsed at the moment. And Steve's like, okay, I want you to do this. And like, these guys come up and then what are you going to do? I'm like, I'll grab the nunchucks. And I just started, and everybody started laughing. And so Steve's like, that's it. So we just improvised it. And then Steve's like, yeah, and you take the knife. And I did a thing where I lose the blade. Everybody's like, oh, do that too. And so it was just a roller coaster. And that night we shot this whole scene in the alley. Mark Hamill was there to shoot his scenes. And at that time, Mark got to know each other through, working on set every day. He got to know me and I knew him. So I'm walking back to my trailer and Mark goes, hey, Ted. I'm like, hey, Mark goes, like, what are you doing? I go, I'm doing some gang stuff right now. I go, Mark's like, hey, but you want a cheeseburger and watch some cartoons? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
So I walk in Mark Hamill's trailer and he had cheeseburgers We were watching Batman. I think, and I did at the time. I didn't realize at the time
Oh,
Ark was doing voices and stuff for Batman, and I had no clue. And but so I hung out with Mark Hamill's trailer, eating cheeseburgers with him and watching cartoons in his trailer. And I thought that's the moment I won't forget.
that's
And
crazy.
through that entire thing, I didn't bother to get a picture with him. I didn't ask for an autograph. And again, it wasn't that he wouldn't have done it. I just was so in the moment. So after it was all over, I'm like, oh, I didn't ask for an autograph. I didn't ask for a picture. Like, ah, dang it. But you get the movie, so yeah.
Right. Well, that's one thing I was looking through your website, a couple weeks back, and I saw that you played the gang members, like just one line supporting a picture, and I was like, that's him. And I had to go back and look, and I was like, I have said Kung Fu Man so many
Kung
times in
Fu
my,
Man.
yeah, it blew my mind. I was like, I can't believe I'm fixing to talk to this guy. So anyway, again, thank you again for agreeing to do this. It just, it makes my day, honestly, and I'm glad that.
Cool, Chili. I'm just trying to help you out. What's
Yeah,
up, man?
exactly. Yeah, that's
That's it. Kung
hilarious.
Fu Man. Look out, Kung Fu Man. Yeah, that was
That's awesome. That's hilarious. Is there any well, let's kind of dive into Guyver Dark Hero real quick then. So now the first movie had a budget, I think around 3 million, something like
that is
that.
correct.
And then
That
it
is
was,
correct.
yeah, so Steve and them come back, and I think originally it was supposed to be something like 1.5 million, but it ended up being slashed like 800,000.
That is correct.
So yeah, so what was the kind of the mindset you guys coming back like, okay, hey, we have a second shot at this. I'm not saying anything bad about the first one, but we have a fully Steve is committing to be the sole director on this one,
Right.
and like we're going to do things a little differently. So, what was the mindset for you guys going into this, and also why would you agree to come back?
Uh, it was a paying gig. The thing what it was is that I think Steve wanted to get back to the original because originally we did Guyver. Steve wanted to do. He was familiar with the manga and the anime, and the Cronus guys were guys in suits. They had the suits and the sunglasses, little earpieces, and he really liked that aspect of it. And then Brian Usna saw Ninja Turtles, like, oh my god, we got to make it like Ninja Turtles. So all the characters are wacky, and so the first Guyver was basically trying to make a Ninja Turtles movie, and we kept saying that's a separate thing. It's not that's Ninja Turtles. You can't.
Right.
So again, it was conflicting. So and then after a while, Steve gave up the fight and goes, okay, fine, it's a comedy. It's gonna be a fun action comedy monster movie, and that's kind of what happened. So, but Steve really liked directing. He knew that he had some momentum with this, so he at least could try to do Guyver Dark Hero. And all the Guyver fans out there, when it came out, people loved it because it was much darker, like the original anime. It was violent. Um, and people realized that they're like, oh, they obviously got more money. I'm like, oh no, we had less money. And I was not nearly involved in Guyver Dark Hero because um I had a job at the time. I was working on their Ultraman, the TV series.
Oh,
That was the
cool.
American version, and it was terrible. It's horrible. We worked on it and we were doing miniatures for it. And I couldn't leave that job, but I made a deal with the guys at the shop. Like when they needed me, I would leave. So I had days on, I was working. And so on the days I wasn't working, I'd go work on Steve's stuff. And so I would show up and be Sten. I did a couple commando. I played a commando. I played Sten. And Steve was shooting. Most of it was in this giant warehouse. And we did go to the woods up on Angel. We went to the National Forest for all the wood stuff in Los Angeles. Um, but at the warehouse, Steve wanted me to play the guy Zonoid because he had a great martial artist, Koichi. Those guys were amazing. Um, Koichi did all the fight stuff, and but he wasn't much of an actor, but he was a fighter. And Steve's like, I really want you to play the guy Zonoid. I'm like, oh, totally. So I got there, and so the cool thing about that was Steve's like, just embody the Bamboo Man from Kapow, like the first film. So I was more overacting, more bigging, talking, rolling man, pointing. It was fun. And also, I got punched in the head. You know that scene where Guyver runs up and he smashes the Guyver Zono in the head?
Hmm.
It's all shot in slow motion. Yeah. And she goes, well, I'm sure this is high speed, so I want to see the impact. I'm like, excuse me? So he's going to punch you in the head. I'm like, wait, what? And action. So this guy goes, ah. And he punched me in the head so hard that the control metal had an LED in there, and the LED made an impression in my skull. Like, so when you watch him punch me, and so That was
That's crazy.
hysterical. Like Steve's like, can we have to do it twice? Wasn't sure we got there. Would you do it one more time, Ted? I'm like, all right, I'll see you in Guyver 3, Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, your rate's going to go a little bit up
Yeah, I was
next.
going. But no, it
Um,
was
Question about that too is, so are you, so you're in the Guyver Zoanoid suit, right? And Bruno,
just the dialogue scenes.
yeah, just the dialogue scenes. So you're not doing any of the stuff like Koichi Sakamoto on the and Alpha stunts, but there's animatronics for the mouth, I guess, and you're doing like the hand gesture.
Oh, not just the Zoanoid, just the when he turns to the
Oh,
Guyver
the
again.
Guyver Zoanoid. Yeah, okay. Either way, you're still
Yeah,
doing
so the guy, yes, that
you're
was
still,
just me.
yeah, you're still doing the hand motions and the kind of support the dialogue. Are you saying the dialogue out loud?
Yeah,
Okay, and then they're just dubbing over that in post.
yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I do the dialogue and get the performance. And when the actor who came back to do my voice, he would put the headphones on, he would he would basically replace my data. But Steve's very particular about matching it verbatim. That's why you're on set doing the dialogue.
Right.
So the actor can hear the pacing and the dialogue, and then he just does it again over you. So it's his voice.
Well, so you played Stryker, and then you've played a couple of these characters, but let's
Right.
go back to Guyver Zoanoid. Is there ever a conversation with TJ Walker or Bruno Patrick saying like, "Hey, I've seen you on set acting, and I'm going to," because even just like a hand motion and like the timing of your delivery is still going to like mirror or reflect what Bruno's doing, or at least maybe that's the idea. Was there any type of conversation? Did you watch the performances?
Mostly, I watched Brian Simpson, who played in Predator 2. He was the Zonoid version of that. So I matched what Brian was doing. Brian,
Okay.
when he's in that big suit and he's that Guyver, he's the Zonoid.
Yeah.
That's Brian Simpson. And again, that's all Steve Wayne direction. With Steve's really big about the body movement and the breathing. So if you watch the characters, they're always exhaling and breathing. And because they have these suits and they're foam rubber. Instead of just having a guy standing there, like like Steve's wants life, and he wants to see people breathing and moving. So it's a big thing about moving, breathing in, talking, pointing, rolling your fingers, adjusting. But it's always, um, but was it Lisker? Not Lisker. It was what's the bad guy again in Guyver 2?
Crane.
His brain. Brain, yeah, he had the great mandibles on him and stuff. And the same thing with the breathing and moving the head stuff. That was all Brian Simpson. So I was kind of embodying Brian Simpson and then doing that to Guyver Zonoid. So
I'm going to butcher the name, but the Zoanoid, you're like the insect one that's in the water in the forest.
Mazo.
Mazo. Okay, I was gonna say
Mazo.
Mazo. So you're adding like the nature and the elements of the earth to this performance. So I'm assuming I have to assume that when you're in the water there, that your suit is
Oh,
lit up with water.
oh, yeah, it's miserable.
Yeah.
It's horrible. Yeah, it's a foam rubber suit. And the worst part was that we had these things where we jump in the water and we do the water and we were shooting. And again, my friend Asao Goto, who was on the show, he helped build the creatures. He built the big rhinoceros creature.
Lisker. Oh no, the one in the wood
In the woods,
the
yeah,
the bear scene. Yes.
the bear monster gear.
Yeah.
Asao Goto built that suit, and we're on location, and we're shooting it. And Asao would look at me, and go, "Monster's not scary during day." I'm like, and I looked at Asao, I'm like, "It's gonna be fine, Asao. It's gonna be fine," because we didn't have the budget. Because it'd be great to shoot at night, but if you shoot at night, you need all these lights and to light the forest and stuff. So with Steve on the budget on the show, we realized that Steve wanted to shoot stuff at night. We had a couple scenes at night, but unfortunately, these big fight scenes we had to do during the day. So we're outside in the day and we're jumping in the water, shooting the water and stuff. And we shot, and Steve's like, okay, and we started losing light because the sun's setting and stuff. And there's all these fight scenes going on and stuff. And then so I ended up having to shoot 2 days. So that suit is foam rubber and it got soaked in water. And the thing was foam rubber to my body. So I had to squeeze out of the suit and then come back the next day and get back in a wet foam suit. And it was next to impossible. So I'm pulling it. And so all the guys, the monster guys come to help me. And they had to grab the legs and open them up for me to get in my legs. And every time they do it, they would just grab the hair on my legs, pull them off. I'm like, oh my God. So there's video of me trying to get in that suit. And I'm like, oh my God, I hate you, Steve Wang. So but
you need some hazard pay with this.
yeah. So anyway, yeah, I got back in the suit and we shot all day. But yeah, it's fun, but it's not glamorous, guys. But no, but yeah, it was it. Got my head cut off. It was fun.
No, it's. I mean, I've seen you. Like I think I said in my interview questions, I've seen you die over 1,000 times at this
Oh,
point.
tons,
Yeah,
tons of
tons.
times.
Whether well, you don't die actually as a striker in one, but I've seen you die. Is it as Sten in? Yeah, Sten, and I've seen you die as Mazo as well. Other question is, you kind of brought up the lighting situation. So I know you guys are shooting on 16 millimeter versus 35 millimeter
Yes,
first film. So obviously your ISO, the chemical reaction there is going to be not as sensitive, so you can't do as good in low light situations, right? So
right.
like you guys have a smaller budget here, but I think it's the general consensus is that you guys managed to make a superior film. The tone is consistent. I would argue that the blocking, the directing is a little um, um, more intuitive and it's got more narrative purpose just in terms of
Right.
the frame of the actors. So did you guys know while making it like, hey, we're making something I consider it special. I know that the world at large doesn't know about it a whole bunch, but I think people who do watch it go, wow, 1994, they did something really cool here, and I think in a lot of ways still hasn't been topped.
No, and the thing is, it was such an impactful film. And Steve Wang one time said this, and I laughed at him, and only to find out it's true that Xena, Warrior Princess, when she flies to the air and does the triple kick,
Hmm.
they stole that from Guyver too.
Yeah, the Guyver kick.
And,
Yeah.
and so the Guyver kick, and that was Steve's thing, and Koichi, those guys did it, and I watched it on set. Years go by. I'm on Xena. I'm working for a company called K&B. I work on an episode. I'm out there in New Zealand for 3 months. And so my job was to dress the Grindel monster. My friend Bruce Mitchell made this giant Grindel monster costume for this actor to wear. And they shipped me to New Zealand to just help put the guy in the suit, take him out of the suit, and also take care of the suit starts to fall apart. I'm just kind of like the suit tech guy. And so I'm on set in New Zealand. And I'm getting to befriend these guys, all these stunt guys, and they're all telling me funny stories. And they're like, so I'll tell you, so you're a suit maker. I'm like, well, I said, I do suits, but I've also been in suits. Like, what suits? I'm like, Guyver, Guyver 2. They both freeze. Like, wait, you're in Guyver 2? I said, yeah. And I had photos. I'm like, yeah, I played Sten. And these guys are just like, wow. And I never watched these grown stuntmen completely start fangirling on me that I was in Guyver 2. And they start going, dude, the fight scenes were amazing. Said, they introduced wire work because we do wire work in New Zealand and we saw the triple kick thing. So we're like, oh my God, we got like, they saw that. They said, when we saw that one night, we're like, oh my God, we got to have seen to do it. I'm like, I was standing like, holy shit, she was right. They
Yeah.
did steal it
Yeah.
from. So these guys, the stunt team from New Zealand saw Guyver 2 and it made such an impact on them. And what's funny is that when you can make the greatest film in the world, but it doesn't mean crap unless anybody sees it. And so when we made the first Guyver, it was a fun movie and it came and left. Nobody cared. It was the VHS day, guys. It sat on the shelf for a couple of weeks. People rented it and it was gone. But there's this thing called cable and it played on cable. That's where all you guys fell in love with it because you watch it and your friends would find it. And then in English, shipped it to England and called it Mutronics. But I had all these friends, people find it. And then so I went in 2016. I went in 2016. I went to Germany for a convention. It was called Epicon. It was in Frankfurt, Germany, and I had a booth. And so all these kids came to meet me. They were familiar with my YouTube channel. This guy took a bullet chain from France, came to my table, and he unrolled this giant poster of Stryker from which, of course, it was called Mutronics. And there's a picture of me with my arm in the. I'm like, oh my God. And he unrolls it in front of me and goes, I heard you're going to be here. So I'm from France. I took the bullet train to get here. Would you sign this for me? I'm like, you want me to damage your poster? I was like, what, really? Like, so I think I wrote like, keep it, yeah, boys with a lot of Z's on it, and just like,
Yeah.
and I wrote MC Stryker on it. And like, and the kid went nuts. I was like, and that's when I realized, holy crap, this film has a following. And only to find out years later, it has a huge following, a cult following. It was kind of nice that when I started going to conventions, I thought maybe I should let people know I'm in this movie. So when I go to cons, I started telling people, hey, I did like a behind the scenes. And so people would just lose their mind. I was in Guyver. So it's nice to know this film finally found its audience. And the same with the second one too. I think both of the films got very small releases in Japan. I don't think they weren't that well because in Japan it's like same idea. They get small releases, they're out for a couple of weeks and they're gone. So we make all these movies and then the idea that people see them and like them is amazing. So yeah, thanks. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, and again, didn't want to speak for everyone who watches the channel, and we really appreciate you guys coming out here and I say coming out here, taking the time to do these interviews and let us catch up with you and kind of learn about the movies themselves. I do want to ask about, obviously, well, one thing I do want to ask about Guyver Dark Hero still is you've also played Sten, right?
Yes.
And particularly you get electrocuted
Yeah.
in that movie. How'd that gag work? Like, what was the precautions made to make that? Because it's a pretty intense looking spark show, right? It just a
Yeah.
simple as, hey, we're
There's
gonna.
a stuff. As for Sten was a much more difficult costume. Striker was a big head. They had the little thing, and we just we glued down the seam around the neck. We had wrinkle lines to hide the seam. But Sten was more of a makeup and less of a costume because I had a full body suit of myself, and then we'd slip the head on, and the neck blended into the collarbone. So they would glue they would glue the head on, and they would glue my mouth and glue around my eyes. And I had dentures, and I had contacts. So I'm in it. And then, so in between shots, there's no taking it off. So I'm like, oh, that's why when I'd show up on set, I'm like, hold on, when are we going to be, when are you shooting? So once I'm in it, I'm in it. And so I was in the stand, had the contacts and things, and we had these hands, and I had these acrylic claws. They were like hard nailed claws. They were super cool. And we were shooting the stuff from the tunnel, and people don't realize this. It's such a great scene. We're running, and it's me running, and Steve wanted this frantic, high pace running, and me slashing at the camera. And to get the pacing, to get it to look right, we'd shot it. We just do it really slow. So I'm actually walking and leaning forward
Oh
and
wow,
just doing this, and they're shooting, and they changed the speed ratio. So they slowed it down. So when they played it, it was much faster. So it looks like we're running. So all that shot of me running slashing was very cool because it was just me walking and doing very slowly. When they got to the electrocution, the pyro guy, this is stuff, this jelly they put on it. It's a flame retardant, and it's super cool. Like you'll see when they set guys on fire in movies, like they set them like, and they're like pretty much like almost naked, and they have clothes on. They're set on fire. You'll see if you look, pay attention. They like their skin's very shiny because they rub this gel that's fire retardant. And again, it's only fire retardant for a couple of seconds. Like so, you can burn. These guys are with timers off camera with stopwatches, and when they see these guys on fire, they reach a certain point where it burns. They have to put them out immediately.
sure.
So same thing with me. They had this jelly on me, and they had guys with fire extinguishers, but luckily I didn't ignite. So I just hit the wall, and they had all these pyros, and they just go pow, 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 pow. And I would, and it was great because you could see it all going off. And
Yeah.
I would just sell the reaction and twitch, and then drop to the ground. But yeah, this was all tons and tons of pyro, but I was protected by the gel. So
I mean, you could easily, no questions asked, put stuntman on your resume as well. You've done it. I mean, you've been lit on.
oh, I've
Yeah,
been kicked, set on fire. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I wouldn't be a Guyver fan if I didn't ask about a potential Guyver 3. It's something, again, we're us fans are starved for information. And was there ever any talks about Guyver 3 that you heard of? And have you heard anything since? And
I think I know David Hayter. I can just tell you what they told. I can tell you what Steve and David told me was it's not going to be surprising that they meet people and they're like, hey, we're like some studio guys, some that start to learn about this whole following and cult following. Like, oh my god, it's like a diehard fan base and and like yeah. So David and Steve are like, yeah, here's this idea we do, and they're pitching it to the guys. Are like, yeah, this is great. We want to do it, but we want to do it with new people and younger people. And Steve and David are both saying, if you guys do this film without, it's going to be a huge mistake. It's not just an IP; it's us attached to it. Like if you do it, you have to let us be involved because David's like, Granny goes, I know I'm older, but like David had this whole great idea. Like the movie is that he is the haggard. He's been doing this for years, and it's taken a toll on his body, and that he passes the unit onto somebody else who can carry on the legacy of fighting off the Zonoids because he just can't do it anymore. His body can't take it anymore.
yeah, old man
Without what
Guyver. Yeah,
yeah, and pass the guy around to it and make a movie about it. And like, oh, and so the guy's like, yeah, we want to do it, but it's not without basically they like the idea of the IP, but just don't want to do it with the guys. And it's just typical. Like everybody wants to do a reboot. Like And a perfect example, like Deadpool just introduced Wesley Snipes as Blade again, and the fanfare goes to show people and show Disney like nobody wants a new Dead, nobody wants a new Blade. They like, and I think Ryan Reynolds was right to say, why don't you just do a movie, a less Blade movie with Wesley Snipes to kind of like be his Logan movie, like his last hurrah, and then you can kill him off and do something new, and then wrap it up. And that's the same thing with Guyver. If you guys want to do something new with Guyver, you got to have the old torch patch onto the new. You just can't, do it without him. But again, it's hard because we're in a right now, guys. We're in a big slump right now. Hollywood doesn't know what they're doing. It's
Yeah.
a sinking ship right now. It's really bad. Like everybody's just watching YouTube and TikTok right now. So the
Yeah.
studio's like, how are we going to make money? Like, how can we do it and make money? Because TV's gone thanks to Netflix, and the streaming model is like it's just Netflix and Amazon. But Amazon is a tech company, so they don't really need the money. And same with Amazon, and Apple TV, and they can throw money at stuff. It's just the Hollywood's, it's who knows what's going on. It's not. Here's the thing: it's not going to go away, but it's a mid transformation into what it's going to turn into. And once that happens, then we can get back to the Guyver 3 conversation. But
Sure.
right now,
Well,
it's just like it's shit.
if they did make it, if Steve did make it, would you hop him back into a suit, or would you rather do something prop or
Oh
miniature?
my God, I couldn't do. I'm
Yeah.
61, guys. I would. You need to get some young, vibrant kids in there. That's like I want just a younger version of me. I would love to have a cameo or be a thug or
I want to
like or
see your character from Guyver One come back, and what happened to him? Like Kung Fu Man, where's he at?
oh,
What's
Ronnie,
he at?
dude, he's been locked up in jail. Now
Okay.
he's that guy's been put away. He
Okay.
got busted.
Gotcha. Perfect. At least
He's
now I
probably he's probably rehab now. He's probably working as a chef in a restaurant. Yeah, because Ronnie's been rehabbed. He got busted.
So, as our listeners may or may not know, you do a really cool service on YouTube where you're
Oh yeah.
going through and doing your props and showing all these great things you can build just from your house. Can you talk a little bit about that and like also what's your next big project you have?
Guys, thank you. Really quickly for you kids out there, I have a YouTube channel by the name The Evil Ted channel on YouTube. And what it was, I worked at a prop house for 15 years. And don't get me wrong, it was a fun job and I learned a lot, but it was a neck bracing Hollywood pace thing. And I realized I stopped making things because it was my job. And when I would come home, I wouldn't be creative or make my own stuff. And I realized at a point I was getting burned out. So I took a break. I just took a little hiatus and started doing YouTube stuff. And what happened was it became fun again. I started making things for YouTube and teaching the kids how to do stuff. So it's my mission to take the intimidation out of building stuff. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I can't do that. And that's not true. You can do it. You just have to start. And so what I do is I do these tutorials and videos to take the complication out and showing you how I do it step by step by myself. I have patterns on my website, but that is my mission to get people to build my own costume. For all you filmmakers, you can make your own costumes and own props. But yeah, that's how I got started. And now I love doing it. I do appearances at conventions. And for all you filmmakers out there who want to get into filmmaking, man, this is the age to do it. The cameras, the technology, you can edit on your laptop. It's crazy. When I was a kid, it was Super 8 film. Then went from that to VHS. Like every generation gets better and better. Point now, there's no reason not to make a movie. You could, again, do a short, make it simple. It doesn't have to be Star Wars. Just make a short little film with your friends and cut it together and show your family and just do each time, just do a little bit of project. Because Hollywood not making anything right now. So this is your time to strike, because when it gets up and running again, they're going to need content. What a better time to pitch your content when the industry's starving for content. Make some fun stuff. YouTube, get out there, people. No excuse not to make something. So easy now.
That's a great place to end the podcast, and I couldn't agree more. There's no excuses. We have these little vertical phones / movie screens.
There's people shoot entire movies with iPhones. It's insane. It's crazy.
Yeah, and there's some really good movies actually, and a lot of won awards now, and it's a really interesting time for the industry, and I'm excited and terrified at the same time.
Yes,
that happens
exactly. I'm right there with you guys.
Yeah.
I'm working on my friend John Soares is making a film. He did a thing called Danger Limit, and it was on YouTube, and I found him through Facebook, and I saw what he did, and just being a fan, I said, hey, if you ever need props or whatnot, let me know. And he went, oh my God, I do. So we hooked up, And then we became really good friends. And now he's making a sequel. Well, he's making a standalone film. It's kind of a sequel, but I'm doing props and costumes and things for that movie as well. And that's been so it's, and again, it's super independent, but when you see it, it looks like it's millions of dollars because we're just taking our time and doing it ourselves. So
That's awesome. Well, I'll make sure I put the channel link for the Evil Ted channel in our
oh,
description
please, thank you.
below. Yeah, of course. And again, just one final time, Ted, I really appreciate you coming on here and giving us these Guyver stories and letting this important IP to a lot of people live on. And I can't stress people enough, if they haven't already, go to Earn Earth Films. I think I got mine from Diabolic DVD, and get the 4K or the collector's edition Blu-ray of the first Guyver film. And there's a
Right.
great commentary on there from you and Wyatt.
Yeah, no, that was a blast. When we did that, Wyatt and I said, "Have you seen the movie?" I said, "Not in years." So we both watched it the night before to refresh our memory, and it was so much came back to me when I was watching it. I mean, realized on the first Guyver, I was like, "Oh my God, I was literally there through the entire shoot." I don't even know why. I think I was one of Steve's entourage people, so I wasn't just playing the suit and doing props. I was doing some effects things on the side. So I was constantly on set. Either I was in the suit or out of the suit. I was such a large part of that film and just took me back to my youth. Yeah. And to make that film, I'm so glad that it found an audience. It really does.
Yeah, and I've watched it, since its release, and it's an amazing 4K transfer, and Steven and all them I can't say it, Unearthed Films did a great job, and I'm hoping that they do the second one at some point, sooner rather than later. Well, Ted, thank you again so much, man. And if for all our listeners out there, the best way to support the channel, the Guyver Geek channel, youtube.com/@theguyvergeek. Go like this video, subscribe. We have more Guyver legends on the way, including Michael Berryman. Go check out our last episode with Wyatt Weed. We have David Hayter, Christy Christopherson, Kathy Christopherson, as well as Bruno Patrick, and tons of people from the anime and the movies. And so if you guys are interested in that, go support the channel as well as all the other Guyver content we have on there. Weekly videos, and we're getting a pretty good following. I'm pretty proud of that. So thank you guys for watching. And Ted, thank you so much for being on here.
Thank you guys. Catch you back next time right here on the Evil Ted channel.
For more content like this, head over to youtube.com/@theguyvergeek for 4K remasters, retrospectives, behind the scenes, and more as we catalog the Guyver universe. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.